I want to talk to you about cannibals today, and specifically a 12-year-old cannibal who lives in the forest in Cumbria and who eats strays. That is what my book review for today is about. It is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. We've got the beautiful book cover up here on top of my shelf, and this is the book review that I'm going to do. I've literally just finished reading it. I finished reading it yesterday, and I have been blown away by this book. I absolutely love it. So I thought we'd do a quick review of the book. We're going to look at the plot. We're going to look at the way that the book was written, the style, the writing style. We're going to look at the genre, and we're going to look a little bit at Lucy Rose and who she is as a writer. And yeah, I'm going to give you my review and my thoughts on The Lamb by Lucy Rose. So I want to talk about the overall plot of the book, just a little bit of like the blurb description. I'm not going to put any spoilers into this section, but I am going to go into a little bit more depth about the plot and kind of the narrative and stuff. And there will be a little bit of a spoiler in that bit because I'm going to discuss the ending, but I will let you know when we come up to that point that I'm going to discuss the ending. I'll put a timer on the screen so you can jump ahead if you don't want to have any spoilers, because I'm aware that a lot of people put these books that I review onto their to be read pile, and I don't necessarily want to spoil it for you. So this first intro, you are safe. There will be no spoilers. So the book follows a 12-year-old called Margot who lives in the woods in Cumbria. It doesn't say exactly where, it's just named as Cumbria. There is a scene, again, this isn't spoiling anything, there's a part where a character in the book says, oh, I used to work in Carlisle, which if you look in that direction. So if you know your geography of the UK, Carlisle is on the north, kind of west side of northern England, and so Cumbria is kind of that area around that kind of side of northwest England, and so it's supposed to be up there in the wild and kind of remote area. In this particular book, Lucy Rose, the writer, has imagined a family who live in the forest, in the woodland of the Cumbrian countryside, they're basically cannibals, and they live in this hut, this house in the forest, and they eat strays. That's what they're called in the book, strays. And the strays are people who come to the house either because they have got lost, they maybe need help, they maybe have car troubles, and they come to the house, and the mother, who is called, oh gosh, I forgot the name of the mother. Oh, I can't remember. The mother, we'll just call her the mother. There's the mother and Margot at first in this house, and it starts off really kind of quite viscerally. You know, you are very obviously in a book with cannibalism from the beginning. So it's quite I won't say squeamish book, but there have been people who've been like, oh my God, I couldn't eat when I was reading this, or it put me off food for a few hours or whatever. It didn't necessarily do that to me, but I can understand how some other people would feel that way. So the plot is these two characters, they live in this house, they attract strays, whether that's somebody that's injured on the fell, whether that's somebody who's had car trouble and come to their house. The two of them together lure these strays into the house, but then the mother very much is the one that kills them and dismembers them. But then together they cook and eat the humans that they have captured. I know, it's wild. It's so different from anything else I've read at the moment. And the book kind of follows their life. It follows how they are in this situation. It doesn't really do much origin storying. It kind of just sits very much within the time period that the kind of events are happening in. So that's kind of an overview. And then, it's all about, the kind of morality of this. And Margot, who is a 12-year-old, who's obviously growing up, kind of coming of age and starting to question the way that she's always lived, this kind of lifestyle that she lives with her mother. And then a new character is introduced called Eden, who comes to the house, and Eden and the mother end up having a relationship, and it's a new dynamic in the house. The kind of dynamic of the house has changed. Eden very much gets involved in the cannibalism, although she tries to kind of slow them down in a way and make it not so obvious so they don't get caught, and so the dynamic has shifted. So amongst this dynamic shift and amongst Margot growing up, she starts to question whether it is right or wrong what she's doing, and that's kind of the plot, really. That's a bit of like what the blurb would say on the back of the book. So let's talk about Lucy Rose, the author. This is a debut novel, and for a debut I think that is absolutely incredible. This is the book cover. There is a limited edition book cover as well, which is black, and then the inside looks like raw meat. So cool. I would love to get my hands on one of those at some point if they come up. I don't think it's available like to purchase brand new anymore, but I might see if I can get a secondhand copy of that because I just think it's so cool. Actually follow Lucy Rose on TikTok, and that's where I first came across her channel and her writing before The Lamb came out. So I was following on TikTok. She was talking about the process of having her book published. She's just one of those authors that is very kind of open about the process, discussing the process, but is having phenomenal success. This is a Sunday Times best-selling book. And so, yeah, she's just had a brilliant start to her writing career. So she has worked in publishing. She understands the publishing kind of world. But I think she's in marketing, so it's kind of separate from the actual physical, like editing and commissioning side of things. And the other thing that I really like about her as a writer is that she's still working full-time, even though she is a Sunday Times best-selling author. Now, I don't know if she will continue to work full-time for a long time, but at the moment she is writing her second book. I don't think any information has been released about the second book at the moment, but she's writing her second one and is still working full time, and I think that's a really interesting insight into the publishing world. I think a lot of aspiring writers think, I'll write my first book and I'll get enough money that I'll be able to quit my job overnight and I'll become a full-time writer overnight, and it often doesn't happen that way. I'm kind of seeing how she is talking about very much still working and writing, and then thinking about how I would do it as well, in terms of I would keep working. So yes, that's a little bit about Lucy Rose. Like I said, she's writing her second book at the moment. Definitely recommend following her on TikTok, because that is her primary channel. I believe she's probably on others like Threads and Instagram and Facebook as well. But yeah, TikTok is the one that I follow her on. So the plot is quite simple in a way for this book. It follows the characters. It's not really like, a murder mystery or a fantasy book where there's a quest and the character has to go somewhere and travel and do this, that and the other. It's none of that. It's very much a character study. It is the main characters, Margot and her mother, at their house. And Margot is kind of discussing the way that they live and the way that they capture the strays and kill the strays and then eat them. And it's very simple in that kind of way at the beginning. But I almost think because it's such a simple kind of, not story, but it's quite a simple plot, that almost heightens the horror, because you're not really being distracted by events or crises or things that are coming up or the quest that the character has to go on. You're just sat there with the characters, experiencing the horror of them killing and eating people, and this 12-year-old child being exposed to that kind of lifestyle. And it's very it studies this relationship, this kind of mother-daughter relationship, in a really kind of intense way. And the mother is, she's not maternal in any way, shape or form. She's quite narcissistic. She's quite almost borders on abusive. There is no abuse. There are twinges of abuse, I will say, throughout kind of the book. There are a few times when she gets hit, or and as you go through the book, I'll tell you when there's a proper spoiler alert coming in a second. But as the book kind of disintegrates, the abuse gets heightened in a way. So yeah, there's Margot and her mother, and then Eden comes along, and Eden is a woman who has seen a notice in the newspaper about the fact that women have been disappearing, and so she goes to the area to try and discover what's been happening. And she comes across Mother and Margot, and they end up having a relationship to the Mother and Eden, and they become kind of like this three household of two adults and Margot, and it shifts the dynamic. Margot and her mother they've kind of relied on each other so heavily, and they've been so intertwined together as a twosome. And then when Eden comes in, Margot's almost like pushed out, and it starts to break down the kind of very symbiotic relationship that Margot and her mother had. And I think it gives Margot the distance to start questioning why they do what they do. Margot also goes to school, and she's got a friend at school, even though her mother says she's not allowed to have any friends. And she's got a very close relationship with the school bus driver, which I was a little bit like, oh God, please don't tell me he's going to end up being some horrific, like, paedophile character or something like that. He's not. But she has like these kind of little relationships, like normal relationships, because the life at home is so abnormal. But you can see through these kind of normal relationships, Margot yearning for more of that kind of normal, average life. So yeah, that's kind of like the first half of the book is kind of like their characters and learning about how they live their lives in these woods, and Margot and her mother's relationship. So this is where I'm going to put in a spoiler alert. So if you don't want to know anything about the second half of the book, then skip to this time or wherever I've put the time on the page. Skip to that time and you won't hear anything about the second half of the book. Right, so I'm assuming that everybody who is still here is quite happy knowing about what happens. Or maybe you've already read the book and you want to discuss the second half. So in the second half, there's this kind of degeneration of Margot's kind of involvement in the cannibalism. She starts to really hate and kind of resent her mother and Eden for the fact that they are killing strays. She at one point digs up, and I think the real tipping point, to be honest with this, is the killing of the what does she call it, the groundsman, the woodsman? I think he's called the woodsman, or is he a groundskeeper? Something like that, anyway. And it turns out that he's having an affair with the mother, but his daughter is called Abby, and Abby and Margot are best friends at school. And I think that connection of the relationship is what really makes him human to Margot for the first time. I think there's this kind of otherness about the strays that come to the house and the way that Margot has viewed the strays, whereas having this kind of thread of connection to the groundskeeper through Abby and seeing Abby's grief. So Margot and is Eden around at that point? I can't remember, but either way, and they kill him and they eat him, all three of them. I think Eden is around at this point, and they eat him. And then, because that happens like in the middle of the book, Margot gets to see Abby's grief then of her father who's disappeared, he's not coming home, he's dead, whatever. And so I think that breaks down as well, the kind of... it makes Margot question why they're doing what they're doing, and that maybe it's not right and she doesn't want to be involved. And so she starts to kind of question these kind of things, and she at one point digs up the groundskeeper's shoes, and Mother and Eden find them and say, "What are you doing? Why are you interfering? Stop it, you're going to get us found out." And so over the second half of the book, it just slowly disintegrates that kind of lifestyle, this kind of bubble that they've lived in. And then at some point, for some bizarre reason, the mother and Eden just decide that actually, I think it's because Margot, she gets a period, she's starting to grow up, and they start to realise that they're going to lose control of her, because she's obviously going to become an adult, an independent adult who has the ability and the right to leave at any time and to walk away, and you can't control a teenager in the same way that you can control a child. And so they decide that they're going to kill her and they're going to eat her, and it's so horrific the way that they talk about it. They're like, "Oh, you're going to be safe and you're going to feel so amazing when you're inside of us," and this, that and the other. The language, I'm going to come on to talk about that in a moment, but it's just so simply horrific. It's horrific in its simplicity. And then I was watching it, and at one point Margot runs away, and I was like, "Oh yes, she's going to get away, and it's all going to come crashing down, and the parents, Margot and Mother and Eden, are going to get caught." No, Margot ends up getting caught and brought back, and I was just like, "Margot, get out, please! Like, I want you to get out. I want you to survive so much," and she just doesn't. And unfortunately, at the end, she is killed. And that was the only bit that I was a little bit confused about. I didn't not like it. I loved the way that it was done, and I thought it was genius to write her as dying and then coming as a spirit. But I was just a bit like, is she dead? Is she not dead? Has she survived? Like, I actually thought at one point that the mother was going to kill Eden at the last minute, because maybe this kind of very small thread of that familial bond that they have, the motherly bond, would kind of knock the mother into the right kind of decision. But she doesn't at any point. So they do kill her, and I was just like, oh. I like the fact that Lucy Rose didn't really go into the gore. She didn't... overlay, didn't spend time in the details, didn't sensationalise it, is what I'm thinking. It's just very kind of, the language is chosen very carefully so that it's kind of like she talks about the pain and then she talks about the release and then it falling asleep. And I thought that was very sensitively handled, because there are people who are killed and murdered by their family or by people that they don't know, and that handling of that situation I thought was very classy. And then she's a spirit. But just before they kill her, she manages to poison a stew that they've made with hemlock. And so she knows that when they come to eat her, she is going to poison them. So she manages to get the ultimate revenge, does Margot, in killing both her mother and Eden, but she has to die to kill them. And the end of it is really beautiful because it says, the strays are safe. This land is now safe. And it was a bit heartbreaking, really, because it was like Margot had to die in order to save everybody else. It's just really beautifully written, absolutely beautiful, and really interesting plot. I've never read anything like this before, so absolutely brilliant kind of way to put a story together. So Lucy Rose's writing style, so I was really unsure what to expect really in terms of her writing style. I think it's very accessible. I think that's really great. It's quite a literary novel. There's no real discussion of the time frame that this is being written in. There are cars, so we know that it's modern times, but there's no kind of tying it down to a specific decade, I don't believe, unless I completely missed that. But for me, it feels like it could be anything from the 60s up to the 2020s, to be honest. So you know that it's kind of in the modern time, but it's not like it was the 14th of August 1964 or something like that. And I think that's really good as well, because the way that Lucy Rose has written it then means that it kind of skirts this kind of mythic, it's folklore, isn't it, really? I'm kind of blending this with my next point, which was to talk about the genre. But I think that's the thing with folklore, it's to kind of wrap a story in a layer of kind of like almost like fantasy or mysticism or something that is a little bit hard to tie down, and I think that's done really well. It grounds you enough to be able to think about the events that are happening and the characters and how the characters will behave, but not so much that it kind of breaks that kind of folkloric horror style. The other thing that I really liked was that the chapters were really short, and sometimes like literally a page and a half or one page, and then that chapter would be done. And I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, it's a specific style that Lucy Rose has chosen. It almost felt like some of the chapters were like little character studies or scene studies. And it felt like some of those chapters you could move around to any point in the book. It'd be like, they'd be talking about a little bit of like the plot or where the family were, and then it'd go to the next chapter and it'd be, Mother and Margot in the bath or in the bathroom, and Margot is bathing while the mother is drawing her or something. It was really, really well written. I don't like books that have got super long chapters. I just find them too long. I don't feel like I've got a breath. I don't feel like I've got a break. And I think this is a book that you need a break. You need a breather from every now and again. And I feel like the tone of the book is so dark and so heavy that the lightness of the reading experience kind of balances it out. You're not having to trudge through hard language. You're not having to trudge through a massive book. You're not having to read 60 odd pages to get to the end of the chapter. And I think I'm assuming that was intentional. I feel like it really balances out both the topic and the reading experience. I thought that was really, really clever. So the genre, I've not read a lot of folk horror before, and I like it. I like it. It's an interesting one. I think if there was a combination of history with folklore and folk horror, I think I would really like that. So this has definitely made me think that I want to read more kind of folklore or folk horror. It's funny because I was in Manchester on Thursday, and I was sat in a bookshop. I was on an away day with my work, and I was sat in a bookshop waiting for my colleagues to turn up. And so I got a coffee and I was sat reading my book, and then I went up to the counter to get another coffee, and the guy behind the counter was like, "I'm reading that book at the moment." And I was like, "Oh my God, it's amazing, isn't it?" And we had a chat about it, and then he was saying, "Oh, you need to read this and this and this and this," and he gave me like a few recommendations of other books. There's one called The Way of All Flesh. Have I made that up? I think there's a book called The Way of All Flesh, and he recommended that one. That's the one that I may move on to next. The other book that I then recommended to him was Michael Stewart's Blackwood Women, because I feel like that will be quite similar in style. But Blackwood Women is a historic folk horror. An interesting one, my kind of first introduction to the genre, but I am definitely going to read some more of it. I'm going to explore it more. And if you've read a lot of folk horror, or you've read The Lamb and you're looking for other things and you find any other books that are very similar to this, do let me know, because I'm always looking to expand my to be read pile. So that's my review. That is my review of The Lamb by Lucy Rose. Absolutely brilliant book. I loved it. I don't really do star ratings or giving it like a number. I just think it was absolutely fantastic. And I think if you like anything that is a bit folky or a bit horror, or is a study of human relationships, if you like something that's a little bit like true crimey, I think this would be a really interesting book for you to read. And if you just want to support a new up-and-coming author, her British author, she's northern as well. She lives in the northeast, does Lucy Rose. So we need to support our northern authors, because there is definitely a north-south divide in terms of publishing, and I think it's really important that we support northern authors and representation from outside of London. So yeah, that's it. What do you think? Let me know if you've read it. Let me know if you want to read it. Put a drop of blood in the comments if you have watched this far, and let me know what you think of this, and let me know if there are any specific books that you would like me to read and review in the future. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and my Patreon is down below if you want any bonus content. So thank you very much. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.